Welcome back, everyone. I'm Winter, and today we're going to learn how to play Starcraft. Specifically, talking about what is a game plan. Probably one of the most important things, a buzzword you'll hear all the time. No matter where you go, no matter what sport or esport, what is your game plan? What are you going to do to win the game? What is your strategy? And at the lower levels of, I would assume, any sport, I've played plenty in my time, but especially Starcraft, you gotta have a game plan. Even if you're bronze or silver, even if you know you might not be able to do it as perfectly as Maru or as Scarlet or as the pro players, you have to have a game plan. And now I'm gonna answer the question, what is a game plan? What does that actually look like? It's not just a word, it's a composition of several words, of which I'm gonna describe here. Now, the simple way to describe it would be early game, mid game, and late game. But to say it like that is a bit misleading, because a game plan is throughout the entire game, yes, but more specifically, the way I would describe it is your early game opener. That is, do you decide to go for an early expansion? Are you going to put on any pressure? Are you going to play defensive? Do you want to go for a really heavy one base? Your transition. And now we're talking about a full game plan. We're not talking about, I want to proxy 3 gates at their base and that's my only plan. That's not a game plan, that's a cheese. And that cheese doesn't really have a transition. But we're talking about a full game plan, which you should at least have when you're thinking about StarCraft 2. So you have your opener, your transition, and your composition, which is somewhat synonymous with early game, mid game, or late game. But your opener is usually the first 4 to 5 minutes, where you decide whether you're going to expand, what your tech choice is going to be. If you're a Terran player, maybe you're going to be going for a lot of Hellions and putting on some pressure. If you're a Zerg, maybe you go for a Roach push, or you just build a bunch of Queens and play defensive. If you're a Protoss, you decide to get a Nexus and go for a Stargate, or maybe get a Twilight Council and go for some Adepts. But your opener is your first step. And I'll go into detail in other videos about what steps those could be for each race. But just your early game plan should consist of, am I expanding, am I putting on pressure, and how do I defend myself? If you're not going to be attacking, then you have to think about defending. If you are going to be attacking, you still have to think about defending and how you should be scouting and things like that. But you need to make a decision. Pretty much your opener consists of your early expansion, if you're taking one, and your early tech choice. And how you're going to use it. So, then comes your transition, where you've done your first tech choice. You've decided, all right, this is what I'm going to do early on. Am I going to continue going down this road? Am I going to double down? Am I going to try to get another base? Am I going to switch up my tech? If I'm a Protoss going for Adepts, am I going to suddenly go for a Stargate to switch it up? If I'm a Terran who's going for Hellions, am I going to transition into a lot of barracks to make biological units? Or am I going to add on factories to maybe get tanks and Thors? If I'm a Zerg player and I've been going Roaches, am I going to tech up to Lair and go for Mutalisks? Or maybe I'm going to tech up to Lair and get upgrades and get better Roaches. But that is what your transition is, and that usually goes into the mid-game. If you want to put a supply or a timer on it, usually that transition, that mid-game, starts in a higher level game between 5 and 6 minutes. A better timing would be between 50 and 75 supply, which is when maybe you're thinking about taking a third base, maybe you're thinking about, you've done a lot of pressure and now you got to find a way to either defend or attack again. So a transition could just be more of the same. That's not necessarily the wrong one. If you've already gone for Adepts and they've done damage, there's no bad reason. There's no reason you can't follow up with Adepts, but usually you want to fill out that tech tree during the transition. That's what the transition means. You transition into not only different things, but more things in general. Whether that's more gateways or barracks, factories, hatcheries, things like that. And that's usually where you add on more workers and you add on more tech in general. That's your transition. And then finally, we get to composition. Once you've kind of transitioned into your secondary tech, once you've done your early pressure or you've done your early harass and you have the economy, and or the tech to build another set of units, you got to decide, what is my late game army going to look like? If your opener is your first 50 supply, your transition is your next 50 to 75, and then usually about 125 to 130 supply, you've already decided what you're going to be building. at least by that point, you should have already decided. By the time you have nearly 100 army supply, you should have an idea of what unit composition you want to make. Once again, I will detail options or preferred unit compositions in another video, and that's going to have to be for each race individually, because the races are not the same. That's what makes StarCraft so interesting. But your composition is just the makeup of your units after deciding on your tech. So if you're a Protoss, this could look like Immortals, Archons, and maybe you get upgraded Zealots for charge, and you use that as a strong ground army, and that's good against a lot of other ground armies. If you're a Terran player, maybe you want to go for a Sky Terran type of army, so you get some tanks, but then you decide to have a lot of Vikings and battlecruisers as well. That is your composition. That's what you've been building towards, and you're going to be building towards essentially until 200 supply. If you're a Zerg player, maybe you want to add on more roaches, but also add infestors for fungal growth, and be able to tech up to Hive and add some Vipers, or maybe end up getting Broodlords in your composition in order to win the game. But once again, I'm not trying to tell you what game plans you should go for. I'm just trying to describe what is a game plan and what you should be thinking about through the game. So once again, to just reiterate, take it from the top. The opener is that early game build. It's a build order. A lot of the time you can just, they're written down in plenty of places. I recommend spawningtool.com, SC2 replay stats. There are plenty of resources to find build orders. You can find some on this channel as well. And you do your early game build order, and you decide, do I want to put on pressure? Do I want to expand? Things like that. And then you have your transition into the mid-game, which maybe it's layer tech Hydras for a Zerg player. Maybe it's a really heavy robotics-based or Stargate-based composition for a Protoss. Maybe it's just Marines, Marauders, and Medevacs for a Terran. And then, as you get to 125 supply, sometimes more like 8, 9, 10 minutes into the game, you get 110, 120, 130 supply. You decide to finalize your composition. At that point, you already have a lot of production. You already should have a lot of your tech that you want. You just have to make the decisions on how much of each unit you want. Like, for example, if you're a Protoss player facing a lot of Hydralisks, a lot of ground units, maybe you want some more Sentries, maybe you want some more Immortals. If you're a Zerg player facing a lot of ground units, maybe you want to work into having a lot of Lurkers and Banelings in order to be able to deal with that. But you go from your opener, and then your opener should leave you in a position to decide what your transition is going to be. You don't necessarily have to change your transition based on what you see. A lot of solid transitions are effectively regardless of what your opponent is doing, unless they're doing something crazy like, for example, a Protoss player going Stargate against someone who's going straight into Corruptor or something like that, something really odd. But overall, your transition isn't that dependent on what your opponent is doing most of the time, and we're talking, once again, you're not going for a 1-base or even a 2-base all-in. You're looking to play the full game up to 200 supply, a full game plan. And then, of course, you have your unit composition of what units do I want to have in my army when I max out, when I get to that 200. What units will make me the most effective against what my opponent is building? And this, a lot of the times, is more dependent on what your opponent is doing. It doesn't have to be, but it's better if you at least have an idea. For example, you don't want to just go for a bunch of Marines against a Terran player. As a Terran player, you don't want to just make a bunch of only Marines against a guy who's going for a bunch of Hellbats and siege tanks, right? They're going to get blown up, so you're going to have to change your composition. In that case, maybe you'd add a lot more Marauders in, or maybe you'd add tanks of your own, but your composition shifts as time goes on. And that's the key point of that late game plan. But hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and look forward to specific game plans for each race. Make sure to give me feedback, of course, in the comments, and anywhere else on stream, whatever floats your particular boat. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this helped you, and I hope to help you more in the future. Make sure to hit that sub button. Smash that like button, boys. No, well, I almost want to redo the entire... No, we're not. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Good luck, have fun, and happy StarCrafting.